As we head into the final weeks of the Biden presidency, the National Urban League is reflecting on the impact of the administration has had now on the economy, jobs, and inflation. Joining us right now is Marc Morial. He's the president of the National Urban League. He's also the former mayor of New Orleans. So here we are at the end of this administration, and I am curious how you would grade what's happened here and how you would grade it in the context of this past election and what maybe Americans think has actually happened in this economy.
Well, it's great to be with you. And, Andrew, on Squawk Box, many say, hey, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the numbers. The unemployment rate was 6% the day Joe Biden took office, 6.4%. Now it's 4.1%. The black unemployment rate was 9.3% the day he took office. Now it's 5.7%. The S&P was at 3,700. Now it's at 6,000. The Dow Jones was at 30. Now it's at 45,000. The important thing to understand as we mark this moment is, what do the numbers say? I think the second thing that's important to the Biden administration, and I think they did not a good job telling the American people that they had put in place a long-term blueprint for the American economy to restore manufacturing, to invest in roads, bridges, water systems, and infrastructure, and to create a new type of energy economy. And I think Americans responded. It's the third election in a row that Americans sacked the incumbent party. And that's the first time this has happened since 1800. So I think the Trump victory was also fueled by an anti-incumbency. I think he was able to put the Biden administration in the posture of being the representative of the status quo. And what Harrison Biden could have done better was prosecute his time in office, particularly his last year in office, when thousands of people, millions of people died, number one, and the economy went into recession because of COVID. And I think some of it had to do with the mismanagement of COVID. So we need to note the numbers so that a year from now or 2 years from now, when we evaluate the Trump administration's economic policies, we look at what it means for unemployment, what it means for black unemployment, what it means for the stock markets, what it means for the American growth rate. These are the barometers by which we should measure the economic.
Marc, are you surprised by the overall, and I'd use the word almost giddiness, that I think if we were to talk to the top 500,000 CEOs in America, that they appear to have about what's going to happen in this country as it relates to business and the economy and maybe as it relates to jobs as well?
Look, I think there's excitement because there have been a lot of commitments made to American business. The question is what is best for Wall Street going to be what's best for Main Street? And that remains to be seen. For example, if you talk about cutting the budget, but that at the same time you do deficit creating tax cuts, then what's the point? All you've done is cut the budget to pay for a redistribution of resources to another segment of the American population. This is what's important. If people want to talk about the deficit, you can't talk about the deficit without talking about the tax side and the spending side. So both have to be talked to in tandem, together. I remember the Reagan years, and I remember the first Trump tax cuts. The first Trump tax cuts, the argument was they would not be inflationary. Rather, they would not increase the deficit because of dynamic scoring. That never came to pass. So we've got to look at all of this in tandem. And I understand business may be excited, but where I think about the American economy, I think about Wall Street, but I also think about Main Street. And it is Main Street where the pain of inflation relative to housing and many household items, the concern that some of these cuts will directly impact the locked out, the left out, the working class, the rural, the urban, the suburban Americans that I'm concerned about. It's going to be interesting to see how all of these promises get put into a package of governing and legislation by the incoming administration.
Marc, the election, Trump had an increase across every demographic of the population. The giddiness Andrew's talking about is almost a collective sigh of relief from the overregulation and so in the the cost of living increases. And I can't believe you're still using that they didn't sell it well enough, as if Americans aren't smart enough to know how the economy is affecting them. I mean, the election's over now. That's not helping anymore.
You and I may not agree on this, but they didn't do a good job selling their own program. They didn't do a good job selling their own numbers. Let me tell you where the inflation comes from.
And I understand, but people know how they feel, Mark. That's all I'm saying. People.
Yeah, but Joe, you got to understand what I am saying. Where's the inflation coming from? If this administration wants to address inflation, do something about housing. Put a plan on the table to increase the supply of housing. I argued with the Biden administration to do the same. They sought to do it. They couldn't do it. Congress blocked it. They could not find another way to do it. So I'll put that on the table. I just feel strong. This was a close election, less than 1.5%. So talks of if you will, landslides and mandates. It's just not the case. We're still a country that thinks very differently about a number of things. And I hope that President-elect Trump, will send a message on day one that he wants to be a president for all Americans.